Good morning and welcome to the Prince's Trust Diversity and Inclusion Talk. This morning we'll be looking at gender equality and female empowerment within the workplace. My name is Dagmar Bennett and I'm sure some of you have seen me on these calls before. So I work within the innovation team within the Prince's Trust, and around 2 years ago now I was running my own business within East London. It was a film studio, a startup within Bow, and at the time the property got turned into flats. So I was really at a stage in my career where I was thinking, what do I want to do next, and how can I use my transferable skills and put them into another environment? Therefore, I decided that I wanted to work within the corporate environment, and I was trying to apply for jobs. And to be honest, I was 28, I'd never applied for jobs before, I'd run my own business, I'd had freelance experience, and all of my work had gotten through my contacts and my network. So I was at a completely new stage and I was like, how do I do job applications, the whole thing. So I struggled to get into work for a couple of months, so I reached out to the Prince's Trust and attended an innovative recruitment event called Get Hired. At that event, I had multiple job interviews in one afternoon, and I walked away with 2 job offers. To this day, my manager, she has still yet to have seen my CV. So a really, really innovative event for young people. So the event focuses on people over paper. So now I've been enrolled for a 1.5 years, and I'm leading on the Prince's Trust Diversity and Inclusion Talks, which has just been featured in the Metro as one of the best live talks to attend this week. So lots of exciting developments there. I'm now really looking forward to talking about this subject because it's a really important one to me and it's close to my heart. So a little bit about why I started the talk. So we all need to educate ourselves and we all need to have open conversations, but most of all, what we all need to do on the call today is we all really need to take some key measurable actions so that we can change the structures within our workplace. So I urge you all, everybody on the call, please take some pen and paper and write down some key nuggets of knowledge that you're going to hear from our panelists. Take those nuggets, talk to your network, talk to your colleagues, and really try and make those changes within your world of work. So please help me on my journey to help more young people, and listen up and try and make those changes. So the Prince's Trust is the largest youth charity in the UK. We help 11 to 30-year-olds with confidence courses and careers. Our main vision is that every young person should have the opportunity to succeed. So this morning, I'm going to set the scene. I'm going to say a few stats that are really going to let you know how young women are being affected by the pandemic. Any crisis makes existing inequalities worse, and we've all been economically affected by this one, with young people at the very forefront. So 16 to 25-year-olds are twice as likely as others to have lost their job during this pandemic. That is huge. It's twice as likely. As well as 36% of young women compared to 25% of young men work in sectors that have been shut down. So reports are showing that the coronavirus outbreak is not only having effects with the workplace and the gender equality, but also at the home. Young women are more likely to be juggling homeschooling whilst working, as well as being the main carer for sick relatives. So whilst acknowledging that this is the current climate that we're in, we must also acknowledge that some organisations are performing positively within gender equality. The Prince's Trust has made a massive, bold pledge to eradicate the gender pay gap within the next 5 years. And we've also just changed our maternity and paternity covers. In 2018, we also started Women Supporting Women, which is an amazing new initiative that looks to get 10 million in funding by 2023 to help young women. So that's me setting the scene. So throughout this chat, please do feel free to use the Q&A on the right-hand corner. Any feedback you've got, any questions, any support for the speakers, please do pop it in the right-hand side. And we will try and get back to you. The moderator will also be writing all of the stats and information that we'll be talking about today. So I'm really excited to introduce our panelists of today, what we've all been waiting for. So I'd like you all to introduce yourself first and say a little bit about why this subject's important to you. So Sharmadean, would you like to go first?
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Sharmadean Reid. I'm the founder of Warnels and Beauty Stack. And this subject is really important to me because our mission as a company is to help women achieve economic empowerment. And, you know, a lot of that comes through work and their ability to earn money, to achieve their career goals, and to essentially get to their highest possible potential. So it really, really starts in the workplace, which is somewhere where I think that you spend almost all your waking hours. It has to start here.
Thank you, Sharmadean. And Busie, would you like to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dagmar, and to the team as well, and for the invitation and taking part in this key conversation. My name is Busie, and I'm a diversity lead and inclusion lead for Google Europe, Middle East, and African sites. Today's conversation is very important to me as we all have an opportunity really to reimagine a more inclusive culture and future as well. 2020 in particular has highlighted that women have been most affected, as you mentioned, Dagmar, and also despite leading the response on COVID-19, we still occupy less leadership positions and are not involved in most decision-making conversations. The way I see it is if we are to emerge from this and build a sustainable future, we need to remove barriers to entry and create the right conditions for women across lines of gender identity, race, ability, and age to thrive.
Thank you, Busie. And on to Ashlika, if you'd like to introduce yourself too.
Hi everyone, I'm Ashlika and I'm 23 years old. I'm currently working at the Young Women's Trust as a fundraising assistant, and this day is really important to me because as a young woman affected by the coronavirus, I see that they're a very vulnerable group in society and we need to use our voices to create this change and empower our generation.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ashlika. So let's get into the conversation. So Sharmadean, you mentioned that Beauty Stack's mission is to create economic and social empowerment for women. Can you set the scene for the audience a little bit and give your reflection on gender equality in the workplace at the moment?
Yeah, so for me, one of the most exciting things about being an entrepreneur, and you know, something that I never really considered as part of the journey, is your ability to design your company and your workplace rules exactly how you want to. You actually have a lot of freedom and flexibility that is not often exercised when you are the founder. So the first time I experienced this was in my nail salon. I opened a nail salon 11 years ago. It was completely for fun and grew to like become this really well-known brand. And I hired, you know, almost exclusively, we had one guy come and paint nails for us in 11 years. It was almost exclusively women. And through working with over 100 women that tended to be from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, I really learned a lot about what holds them back in the workplace. And I essentially had to go above and beyond what is seen as the norm to keep the women engaged in the workplace, whether that meant more flexible working, the ability to have a sabbatical. You know, women might often think that they need to quit a job to look after a parent or a loved one, when I was like, no, you can take the time off and your job is here for you when you get back. So, you know, the WAR experience really showed me how women can drop in and out of the workplace because of the unpaid labour they have to do at home. And I always worked like I said, as much as possible to keep them in. With Beauty Stack, which is my current business, Beauty Stack is a social network for booking beauty treatment. So think if Instagram met booking.com. The thing with Beauty Stack is that we are a engineering heavy company, right? So 65% of my company is engineering. They're all men. The other side of the company is marketing, community, brand. They are all women. And a different type of inequality came when we had to distribute employee share options, because the guidelines say that if you're in a technical role, you should get more share options than if you're in a community brand role. And I was just like any other founder doing what I thought was the norm, because the norm is you give the technical team this amount of equity, you give the marketing team this lesser amount of equity. And after about a year, I realized that this was me perpetrating the inequalities that happen within a company. And I had to, again, rewrite the rules myself. And I spoke to my investors and was like, you do realize this is quite biased to women, the way that you said to do it. And they were like, we never even thought about it. So those are just a few examples of how in my business, from a very small scale, when I was running a small business, to a deeper scale with, running a technology company, how I have found that being a founder and starting your own company, you have the opportunity to rewrite the rules of how you create a more inclusive workplace.
Thank you, Sharmadean. Rewriting the rules, definitely, I agree with that. Thank you for that. So Busie, you're working across Europe, the Middle East and Africa. So what is the data showing that the current climate of representation for women is, and how, how do you think that company can use that data to help create their change and achieve their goals?
Thanks. So I will talk here from a kind of Google point of view. So Google is a data-driven company, and our decisions are informed by the analysis that we actually see from that data. I cannot speak directly to that data across those regions that you mentioned, but what I can do is actually invite the listeners to visit our site, diversity.google.com, to get a view on how we're progressing globally when it comes to gender parity. Our goal, I should note, is that we need to reflect the available talent pool in these areas that we operate in. I'm going to take it back and dial it back in terms of basics and break down what actually representation means, because it took me a long time before actually walking into this role, into this environment, to understand what it means. Representation is essentially diversity. So the people we're bringing into an organization and their cognitive differences. There are obviously a number of factors that impact this. When companies are looking at their data and how this is actually affecting young women across the board, they need to look at their hiring across all levels. And especially when we're thinking about young women, what does their attrition data tell them? Who's actually, why the reasons we young women are leaving? Is it the conditions of the company? Is it a lack of proactive talent development? Is it a lack of support mechanisms in place, such as benefits? It is also very important that as they are monitoring this data, again, looking at promotion, is there parity? Is there fairness across the board? Are there opportunities to essentially increase representation at senior levels as we progress? And if you're a global organization, again, looking at the transfers in and out. So actually, who's actually transferring out? What are the reasons? Because these actually impact representation at market level. At Google, we use this data to obviously ensure fairness across all our processes, across all levels. So we use things like annual employee surveys, which measure the sentiment across all areas. So literally, it's a list of questions that are asked to measure how we're progressing against all the 4 pillars, which is hiring, retention, attrition, and so progression, and also culture. We also use performance reviews, which also determine and see if managers are making a difference within actually managing their teams. And we also collect race and ethnicity data voluntarily through our self-ID campaign, which actually is aimed to help increase underrepresented talent. So these are some of the few ways that Google is actually incrementally making a progress on its goals, and some of the ideas that companies can actually start to look at when it comes to data and actually looking at that culture when it comes to young women across.
Thank you. I know you mentioned about ethnicity there. Do you think that the gender day gap gender pay gap reporting is a type of model that we could possibly use for ethnicity pay gap reporting in the future? Do you think that that's a model that can be transferred over to look at representation?
I hope so, particularly in London, where we're seeing the biggest gaps, of course. The success of this actually, Dagmar, relies on how that ethnicity data is collected in the first place. But that should not be a deterrent to companies and organizations to say we can't do this because we don't actually have the data. Obviously, the response rates as well, GDPR if you are a global or international company, and legal considerations. But as I mentioned, it should not be a deterrent, and companies should actually start collecting and analyzing that data and actually seeing what the trends are and improving over time how they actually collect that data. And I know if I look at the stats back from 2018 to now, there's been a slight increase, but I would like to see it actually increase more.
Yeah, it was actually normally every company has to give in the gender pay gap, but this year because of the coronavirus, companies, they're missing like 44,000 reports. So it'd be interesting to see how that's affected the stats. Yeah. So Ashlika's personally, I've worked with her on my team. She's an amazing volunteer for the innovation team, so I know how amazing she is. This is the first time that she's doing a live talk with us. I'm really excited for her to be with us today. So Ashlika, do you want to say a little bit about your experience as a young woman, the support that you've got from the Trust, and also what are the findings that the Young Women's Trust have found out?
Thanks, Dagmar. So as you said, the Young Women's Trust have just done a report called Picking Up the Pieces, which looks at the effect of the pandemic on young women. So throughout my discussion, I'm going to be referring to some of these facts and statistics. So I'll start by telling my journey. So I graduated in 2018 and I was one of the lucky ones to actually get a job straight away. It was a temporary job working in an insurance broker. This was my first job, so I had no idea what to expect. Little old me going into the big world of work. From the moment I stepped into this office, I could instantly see it was very male dominated and I felt out of place, and especially because I already suffered with anxiety. However, due to my job role being an administrator, I was placed with other graduates and young people, so I felt a little bit more comfortable. And as I mentioned, it was a temporary contract, which made my anxiety a bit worse because I was uncertain of what was going to happen next, but I just took the job as anyone would coming out of uni. So our report found that 43% of young women had been offered a 0 hours contract compared to 35% of young men. And I think this is because when employers are hiring people, they look at young women thinking they're eventually going to have a kid and go on maternity leave, and they're just quite like uncertain of what's going to happen. So I feel like that's why they're offered 0 hour contracts. And also 41% of young women were worried about their employer not understanding their mental health needs, and a quarter said it affected their ability to stay in a job and manage finances. Now, this is exactly what happened to me. I was really worried about telling my employer about my mental health issues, and I also felt very undervalued, underpaid, and ignored in my workplace. So I made the brave decision to actually leave. I was really anxious, I was really depressed and unhappy, and my confidence was just really, really low. And I ended up going on universal credit. But this was a choice that I'd consciously made. Not many young women have this luxury to choose to go on universal credit because their job is making them unhappy. So another statistic is for 84% of the young women aged 18 to 24, this was the first time during this pandemic for them applying for universal credit. And 3 out of 5 women were worried about their mental health. So after I left my job, I was just so left in the unknown. I didn't know what to do, but I knew that my mental health came first and I needed to work on that. And I came across a Facebook ad for the Prince's Trust Future Leaders Programme. And I was so shocked to see that it was a free programme aimed just at young women, young people to build their confidence and self-esteem. So I instantly took the opportunity, grabbed it by both hands, and it was the best thing that I ever done. After that, I went on various other programs from the Prince's Trust, including Get Hired, and my confidence grew. I identified my key strengths and values, and ultimately they've helped me get to where I am today, and I'm so thankful for the Prince's Trust for this. I then managed to land myself several jobs, one of which was working at the Prince's Trust. However, it didn't come without its challenges. I faced discrimination and microaggressions at different points in my career, and it showed me that organisations still have a long way to go in terms of equality, diversity and inclusion. So another fact I'd like to say is 2 out of 5 young women said they had experienced sexism in the workplace. 41% of young Black women had been discriminated against when in or looking for work because of their ethnicity, as did 28% of Asian women and 22% of mixed ethnicity women. Now, I think it's quite clear from my experience and these findings from our Young Women's Trust report that there's still a lot to be done in terms of gender equality and female empowerment. Thank you, Dagmar.
Thank you, Ashlika. That was like amazing to hear your story. Like, I haven't even heard it all the way from the beginning, so thank you for sharing that. And also all of the stats that you say, like really, really interesting, and so much work to be done. So thank you. Shamadian, are you able to share with our business audience some of the best practices you've created in empowering change for young women?
Yes. One of the things that, especially here in Ashlika's experience, one of the things that I found when interviewing is that women will often do 2 things in interviews, and bear in mind this is purely anecdotal. It's not data driven. This is just my limited experience in hiring for tech roles. They will either do 2 things. They will either pull themselves out of the hiring process very early because they feel intimidated or that they're not competent enough or lack of confidence. And then the second thing is if they do have the drive to continue with the interview process, they tend to over prepare, overachieve, because there's a fear of not being seen to know enough, you know? So I feel like both of those things come from a perception of a lack of knowledge. So they either drop out of the race because they feel they're not good enough, or they over prepare and basically overcomplicate their presentations because they're worried that they don't know enough. And in both of those experiences, what I've realized that I needed to do is 2 things. Virtual hiring has been incredibly challenging for everybody, right? To be on a Zoom or on a Teams with people that you don't know and just have all of these faces staring back at you. I make sure that every single person turns their camera on, like as a standard. I make sure everybody introduces themselves to the candidate, so that they feel more comfortable in the room. And I also always make sure, you know, in our company we have, as I'm sure you can imagine, excellent diversity stats. We have 60% BAME and 40% women. And I make sure that there's an array of genders, races, that they can see on the screen. That's really important. The second thing is that I've actually taken the time to coach interviewees before they appear in front of everybody, which I think that some people are quite surprised by. But if I believe that men do this, but in a different way. They might do it like, you know, after work at drinks, they'll be like, well, this person's really interested in this, so make sure you say this. And this person's, do you know what I mean? There are all of these like social, the blending of social and work environments for men that I don't think women participate in as often, because I don't like hanging out at the pub. I don't know about you lot. Which is where that like lubrication of social connections comes in, right? So in the absence of me taking a candidate for a drink before the big meeting with everybody else, I will set up time with her. I will say to her, these are the business objectives, because often a candidate will do a presentation. I always set our candidates a task. So they'll do their presentation and they'll have no concept of what the bigger picture is for the company, who the major players are, who the stakeholders are, what everyone needs. I'll actually spend time coaching a candidate before they present to the whole company, which makes them feel far more confident, far more relaxed, and far more prepared. And when I've done that, the success rate is much, much higher than when a candidate just comes in blind, does a presentation, doesn't know anyone in the room, just sees a sea of white male faces, doesn't see anyone who looks like them. These are all things that basically can hinder a candidate getting through the process and actually having a chance and having a shot. And that's what I see it as. I feel like my role is to get everybody to zero. So, you know, again, some of the stats that Ashlika said kept making me think, well, what these things are doing is stopping women getting to the same, like, to zero. You know, if everybody's at zero and has the exact same chance at the exact same thing, that is what I see my goal in doing. So I just try and work with a female candidate to be like, how can I eliminate anything that's keeping her at a negative and try and bring her to zero, so that when she's doing her interview, she's doing it with the same confidence, entitlement, you know, mental security as any other candidate. That's all I can do, and hopefully they take it from there.
Thank you. Yeah, the importance of coaching. Do you think, Sharmadine, that technology can act as an enabler for economic empowerment for women?
Well, we signed up to the UN Sustainable Development Goals for exactly that. One, it's goal 5.2, which is, you know, empowering women through information technology. And for me, the incredible thing about tech is the way it democratizes anyone to be able to earn a living. That is the thing that I am most excited about. I love any small business tool, whether it's you know, eBay, Shopify, anything that enables someone to be like, okay, I can make a store, I can do a logo, I can sell my services, I can sell something. Because when I was a teenager, when I was a student, I would do anything to make money for, like, you know, while I was studying. I would go into charity shops and buy secondhand shoes and then put them on eBay. I would write essays online, like, for other people for cash. I'd just be doing all kinds of stuff. But it was always through the internet, always. The jobs that are not, I personally, and I've been reading a lot about this, didn't feel as safe in those roles. So, like, you know, I loved working in pubs and restaurants, but they were rife with opportunities to be abused in somehow, right? I feel like a lot of the low paid work, whether it's insecurity through it being, when I was younger, there was no such thing as a 0 hours contract, not technically anyway. But, you know, when I was younger, it was still insecure. There was a financial insecurity to the work because you knew you were disposable. And that was just one insecurity. But the other insecurity was just physical safety. And I think what's wonderful about technology is it puts a lot of power and autonomy into a young woman's hands to be like, what can I do to earn money? And with Beauty Stack, what I was thinking about was, you know, when I started my nail journey, I employed, like I said, over 100 women over 10 years, but I never really enjoyed the process because I knew the market forces meant I could only ever pay them a certain hourly rate. So, you know, like I can't suddenly start charging £100 for a manicure and therefore pay the girls more. So I always thought, how can I make something where you're running your own business, but under the shelter of WA, which eventually became under the shelter of Beauty Stack. So I'm really interested in business models that support and power creators, creatives, artists, small businesses. And right now we have a breadth of women. We've got almost 1,000 women on Beauty Stack selling everything from coaching to financial management to nails, lashes, hair, you know, massage, everything. It's like peer-to-peer transactions through pictures and recommendations. And that's what I think is important.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, technology can empower young women, definitely. 100% agree on that. Thank you, Sharmadean. So, Busie, how do you think that companies can create a culture that ensures women's voices are heard and elevated to senior positions?
I loved what Sharmadean was talking about in the last bit, kind of like that peer-to-peer transactions and what she's basically creating over at Beauty Stack. And one of the things that I love about working at Google is the fact that Google is very big, apart from obviously from the people that I work with, is very big on treating its employees like owners and letting us lead from our seats. And obviously our culture is built on our values, which are deeply centered on inclusion, on trust that promotes transparency and the sharing of ideas across the organization. So it's very, very normal to literally have Googlers, which is basically people that work at Google, that's what we're called, literally teaching each other. So there's so many courses, there's so many coaching opportunities, and you can learn so much on top of obviously your day-to-day job. And I think this is very important because it's actually enabled that inclusive culture and enabled women as well to essentially have a voice and bring their talents to the fore. So it's important that companies also create this inclusive environment where everyone feel like they can succeed to their full abilities and actually bring their talents as well, because that's where obviously innovation works. Sharmadean also actually mentioned anecdotally some stats when she was talking about the kind of the hiring process, what she's experienced, and obviously when women are over preparing. And one of the things that we've seen, there are some stats that actually show that confidence sometimes is a barrier for women to go for senior positions, actually apply for a job. And at Google, we have an initiative which is actually designed by an employee called I'm Remarkable. I'm Remarkable is an initiative that strives to empower women to speak openly about their accomplishments in the workplace and beyond. And it's actually open to everyone outside of Google. So companies, universities, anyone can actually sign up and participate in this 90-minute workshop. So again, this is another example of actually creating the right environment and that opportunity for people to actually bring their ideas and help others as well. One of the things that companies can do, and I have to obviously be very, very kind of beat the drum on this because this is the work that I do, is actually embed diversity, equity, and inclusion training, especially at managerial level. Managers have an importance in actually making sure that their teams are thriving because essentially they are custodians as well of those employees. So embedding those trainings so that managers actually understand what it feels like to actually manage someone across, like I said, gender difference and also race as well. When we look at intersectionality and marginalized groups, summits are also another way for companies to actually ensure that women's voices are heard and also give them the opportunities to network and meet senior leaders, which often they don't have the access to. One example that we did in 2019 in Google was actually hold the State of Black Women Summit. Because if I'm thinking about Ashlika when she was talking about some of the challenges, kind of the stats that she was sharing, we held a State of Black Women Summit in London, where essentially we brought all women across Europe, Middle East, and Africa who identified as Black together. And the aim of this summit was essentially to share experiences, to address opportunities, and most importantly, support personal and professional enrichment. And what you tend to find is when you're actually being exposed to a wider network, then you're aware of more opportunities that exist where necessarily you wouldn't even be able to. Mentorship and sponsorship are other ways. Obviously, sponsorship is organic. It's something that you can't actually just create. It has to be, it's a different form of actually letting women progress. But having mentorship opportunities, having mentorship programs, I can't stress, if I look at my career, where I am, how I've progressed, even at Google, if it wasn't for mentors, I don't think actually I'll probably be even here speaking in front of everyone and being taking part in this panel with these awesome ladies. But essentially, mentors have helped me to navigate and understand actually the corporate culture and the world as well. Employee resource groups. So I know this is sometimes a term that's probably new to other companies that necessarily don't have obviously the size and the diversity. And obviously, kind of, I always liken it's like an American thing that came over to Europe. But employee resource groups are essentially important in ensuring that all women voices are heard. And if we look at Google's largest global network is actually a Women at Google employee resource groups, and that actually resource group aims to empower women at all levels. I guess other things that companies can do is engage with organizations that champion females in their given industry. So particularly at education level, because I know I'm talking from kind of corporate, obviously union job, but at the same time, we need to be reaching women at the education level. So essentially, again, introducing apprenticeships and internship opportunities just to give them a sense of actually what does the corporate world look like, and in my case, what does the tech industry look like? What opportunities actually exist? As Shamadine actually mentioned, I mean, you can do almost anything on the internet. So having that exposure is essential. And at the same time, most importantly, I think companies can actually help students prepare as well for those careers. So she mentioned coaching that she's doing. So we often at Google help females prepare for careers in tech through various programs, and also giving scholarships as well through our Women Tech Makers program. I guess one of the things as well, if I'm thinking about women, obviously how supporting kind of that progression and obviously making sure their voices are heard, I can't eliminate mothers who are returning back to work. So again, if we're thinking about mothers returning back to work, particularly after parental leave, a company needs to look at its policies, it needs to look at its support system in place. I mean, basic things such as providing space for nursing mothers to pump, being very, very conscious as a manager to respect when your basic calendars are busy, because essentially a nursing mother could be in the process or literally just doing what she has to do. Ensuring flexible working options are available as well. And I think the most important thing, particularly with obviously what's happened this pandemic, post-pandemic, is having an open and honest conversation about what you expect from a performance perspective and obviously scope of workloads. And I think some of these can be very, very powerful ways in creating a supportive culture where women feel that they can thrive and actually progress as well.
Thank you, Busie. So many amazing takeaways there. And it's interesting what you were saying about mentors, because I've got like 3 mentors from different industries, and they all help me to, basically understand the corporate world. So that's really, really useful. And also you were saying about networks. I know that the paternity and the maternity changes that we've done, a lot of those changes within the HR have all been advised by our PT Now, which is our network for women. So I think that importance of network is a really good valid point too. Thank you. Ashlika, you mentioned all of the stats that you'd kind of found out with the Young Women's Trust, but can you tell the audience on what you think that they can do to help young women at these current times?
I just want to mention something as well that Busie said. I took part in the I Am Remarkable workshop. I think it was during lockdown actually, because I became jobless, and so I needed something to empower me, and it was really great. So I recommend everyone to go and do that. I also recommend everyone who is struggling right now and needs some sort of coaching or even help with like CV applications and feedback to go to the Young Women's Trust website, because they offer this free mentorship, coaching and CV like work application feedback. So our Young Women's Trust report, Picking Up the Pieces, came up with 5 recommendations of what the government and society can do to help young women during the coronavirus and beyond. So the first one was to provide safe and secure work opportunities for young women. So the government's job plan needs to include investment in sectors many young women work in, such as hospitality and care, and targeted support is needed to allow routes into new work areas such as mentorships or internships. Alongside this, equal pay reporting and investment in support is needed to allow young women to challenge unsafe work practices and discrimination. So as I mentioned before, many young women have faced discrimination in the workplace that goes unreported, and we need to create a safe environment which allows these women to speak up and have their voices heard without being ridiculed or prosecuted. So the second one is to provide better financial support and benefits. So the government need to reform the benefit system to better support young women during this crisis and beyond. And reform is particularly needed for carers, single parent families, and those trying to access work. The third recommendation is to report on the data of the impact of coronavirus on women. The government's response to the coronavirus needs to be informed by this data and the voices of diverse young women on the economic and wider impacts of their lives. Until people are faced with the stats and they're laid out on the table, they won't realise, they won't stop and reflect and think, what can I do, what can we do to help these young women in work or those looking for work as well. So the fourth recommendation is to have better mental health support specific to young women. So I talked a lot about my mental health issues in the workplace and just in general, and accessible mental health support is needed, specifically tailored to young women, because they have such unique and fragile experiences which are different to older women and just people in general, especially with the confidence and the self-esteem and just having that ability to actually go forward into the world of work, being able to be independent, financially independent, without having these worries of like unpaid work care that Sharmadi mentioned as well, like looking after their children and even just going shopping and all these things that they need to do. So they just need to be really supported in terms of their mental health so they can have the ability to go forward and prosper in all these other aspects of their life. And the fifth and final recommendation that Busie and Sharmadi have both mentioned is the investment in digital resources and better remote support for young women, so no one is felt isolated and unsupported during this crisis and beyond, particularly those living alone, single mothers, and those experiencing domestic abuse. I think we need to come together and be better allies to one another rather than being seen as competition. We need to encourage that, you know, collaboration and support and kind of like teamwork with one another. And I think by taking these steps, we can be on our way to creating better gender equality and female empowerment.
Thank you, Ashlika. So many great takeaways from today. I've literally been like scribbling them all down. So thank you for that. So I just want to kind of end the panel discussion before we go on to the Q&A. Just with asking the panelists really to look at one key takeaway, or a couple of key takeaways that you really want the audience or any CEOs or any big corporates or anybody that's on the call, what do you want them to do to really change young women's lives? Sharmadi, would you like to go first?
Yes, and this is just following on a little bit from what Ashlika and Busie just said, which is two things that I wrote down is that Busie mentioned interns and internships and mentorship. Interns should be paid. That's just a standard. We do not take interns without paying them a London living wage. I think what happens when you have unpaid internships is you basically you dismiss anyone again from lower socioeconomic backgrounds that can't participate in work for free. So at the bare minimum, we do a minimum wage or a London living wage for paid internships, and I'd like to see more of that in larger companies as a standard. The second one is that fathers are really, really important for gender equality in the work for working women. There should be as much flexibility for fathers as there is for mothers, particularly in those first 3 years. Because if there is a culture in the company that the fathers don't have as much flexibility, then all you're doing is penalising the mother at home or the partner at home that the workplace doesn't see. It's like, do you get what I mean? It's like passing on the inequality. So actually in Beauty Stack, 3 of my team members I'm the only mother in the company, but there are 3 fathers, and we allow them full flexibility. They all bring their kids into work in a pre-COVID world, and it just shows that they're as important in the child raising process too. So those are my two big takeaways: is pay interns and give fathers the same rights as women, mothers in the workplace.
Thank you, Shamadine. Busie, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you. Today's talk is obviously about gender equality and female empowerment, and I think it would be remiss if I don't say mine is on gender parity. So I will allow literally companies to make a clear commitment to drive diversity, equity, and inclusion, particularly with a lens on hiring, attrition, and promotion, and actually aspire to achieve equity across all processes and systems. And this goes back to my earlier point. If we are to build a sustainable future, we need to ensure that we have gender parity across the board.
Thank you, Busie. And Ashlika?
Just echoing what Shamadine and Busie said, but just providing safe and secure work opportunities for young women, whether that's them having certain benefits included in their contract, and also, like Shamadine said as well, about men having that equal flexibility as well to allow the women as well to prosper in their jobs and, you know, feel stable and secure, and allow them to build their confidence and grow.
Thank you all. So we've got around 12 minutes to do some Q&A from the audience. So anyone who hasn't had the chance to put their questions, please pop them in the chat now. I've got a couple here that have come up, and one that I think actually is a really important question for us all to talk about is, how do we include and encourage men in the gender equality conversation? So how do we bring men on the journey with us? Who would like to take this question? I'm sure all of us have got something to say on it, so who would like to go first?
I don't mind. Again, I can only talk about my very small my experience at my very small company. And the way that we have done it at Beauty Stag is to bake it into our business model and to our vision and mission and principles. So, you know, our entire business model is around supporting women, and I repeat it constantly. And every single Friday when we do a company all hands, we have to ask everybody to be principal champions, and basically say, what have they done that week to support our bigger mission? So I feel like that rather than make men othered in the conversation, if you build a business that is supportive to all types of diversity, and it becomes part of the culture of your company, that way it permeates through everything. So I would say start at the very top with your company culture, and it trickles down. I also would say that one of the things that's been successful in my company is that we don't, it's a personal rule for me, is that I don't let the small stuff slide. So if anybody says anything, however marginal, negative about anything, I will always pick it up immediately. So, you know, really early on, actually a female QA tester said something about, you know, what happens if like women are having Botox, for example. And I said, we're not here to judge. That's not our place. They can do what they want. Do you know what I mean? So I just don't let the small stuff slide. And I think men picking up on that, that's the way that they can help, through very, very small incremental change from the bottoms up in not letting small stuff slide, and then from the top down in your culture, practices, principles.
Amazing, thank you. I don't know if Busie or Shlika, if you want to talk about how you think we can bring them on the journey with us as women, if you guys have got any points on that.
I was going to flip the script and see if Shlika wanted to go first before me, since it's been Shamadine and me, but I'll go. I guess it goes to the culture that's been created. And one of the things at Google is we've created that culture for all voices to be heard. I'm obviously starting from the top to down. And actually modeling good role behavior. So I talked about obviously leading from our seats, our values, and modeling good role behavior. We're very big at Google in actually having open conversations, so challenging the status quo. And allyship is a very, very important piece, kind of a journey that we're all undertaking So there is actually training on what actually allyship is, and actually not othering male to say, because you are the dominant group, this is the reason why. We're actually having open conversations and actually including and encouraging them to be allies in the workplace. And one of the things when I mentioned about modeling good role behavior is essentially just being aware in team meetings, being aware of who's actually dominating the conversation and making space, if you can, for if there's actually someone within the room, let's say obviously a young woman or female who is actually unable or has their point silenced, actually standing up and actually putting them to the forefront. The other thing as well is actually when there are opportunities, when going for pitches, for meetings, giving again space at the table for women to actually have a conversation and actually be included as well. So there's so many things that can be done, but I think it's literally just having mutual respect and having those open conversations.
Thank you. Ashlika, would you like to say anything, or am I okay to hop on to another question?
Just quickly, basically echoing what Sharmadeen and Busie said, having those open and honest conversations about women's experiences. So I don't know if you probably did hear that Meghan Markle released an article about her miscarriage in the New York Times, which is very powerful and very effective to start everyone having those open, honest conversations. And even Scotland making sanitary products free for all women. I think these things are really key to enable men to realise what's going on for all us women in society and help them come into the conversation for gender equality.
Thank you. Another question I've got here, which is definitely something I've felt before as a woman in the workplace or when I was running my business, is sometimes when women are assertive at work, it can be misinterpreted as being bossy or sassy. How can we deal with that? And yeah, what's your guys' response to that, and how would you deal with it personally? Don't know if somebody wants to go first.
Oh my goodness. If I'd had £1 for every time someone said this stuff about me, I wouldn't have to run a company, would I? The way I feel about it is it's twofold. It's a bit like what I said with the don't let the small stuff. Understanding that language is a powerful weapon, and the way that you use language to describe people, you're essentially building an image of that person in everybody else's mind before they've even met that person or dealt with them or had interactions. So I would encourage your team to have conscious use of language and understand that language is a weapon. The second thing is that women can just stop caring about being liked, literally. Like if somebody says to me that I'm aggressive, bossy, any of these things, I want to know critical and useful and constructive feedback on the things I might be doing that aren't helping you be motivated and productive. So, you know, if there is an individual, it's one of the reasons why I say that anonymous feedback for me is pointless, because someone might want a direct attitude from me and it makes them incredibly productive and motivated and keen to get their work done. But then for another person, a direct way isn't actually useful to helping them get the best out, and it actually increases their anxiety and poor mental health. So for me, I'm like, I need constructive criticism and feedback on how I can help you be most productive. Anything else is irrelevant. Anything else that you think about my personality, whether you like me, irrelevant. We're here to build a company, to do a job. I just need to get you productive. And if my actions don't help that, then I'll act on them. Stop wanting to be liked. Doesn't matter.
Ooh, Shamadi, as you're talking, I was like, opinions are opinions, which is why they're opinions. But as you were literally, yeah, we need to have confidence. You know what your abilities are. But you mentioned something about that conscious use of language. And I'm thinking back, I'm literally just dialing outside to Will Smith. So obviously Will Smith having a conversation in terms of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Auntie Viv, who was a character in the sitcom, which has obviously been playing for a long time. And just his use of words literally destroyed a woman's career for nearly more than 2 decades. So I'm going to dial it back down to say, we're human beings. Let's just be conscious of the language that we use and actually be aware of the intent. Why is it that you are actually labeling or calling somebody that word? Where is that coming from? Is that coming from a good place whereby you're actually encouraging growth or giving real feedback? Or is this literally something more untotally towards it?
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to another question. Sorry, I'm literally reading some of them as they come in. So with Kamala Harris being appointed the role and now represent the responsibility of being the women and the first woman of colour as vice president in the US, how key is representation and what does it mean to you, Ashlika? Do you want to take that one first?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again? That was quite lengthy. I just
quite tongue twisted up. How important is representation in senior positions to you?
It's really important. That's why I love doing all the diversity and inclusion work and getting involved in these kind of conversations, because it's really important for someone like me to see have a role model in a senior position. So it's like, well, if they can do it, then why can't I? So I think that's just the main thing, is having a role model to look up to and empower you and provide encouragement to, you know, all underrepresented women and make them feel like they can achieve whatever they want to achieve.
Thank you. I'm just going to move on to one last question, which is, how do you think that organisations can support young women's mental health? Don't know, Busie, if you want to take this one.
By having benefits in place if you can. Mental health is a serious issue, and obviously post-COVID, we are going to have another pandemic, which is essentially mental health. And I think creating safe spaces, psychologically safe spaces, acknowledging that mental health is important, obviously the impact it has. And if, yeah, like I said, having benefits in place to actually support women with mental health issues.
Thank you. I don't know, Sharmadine, if you've got anything on mental health for young women as well.
I would say that there's a lot of preventative stuff you can do by making your employees feel valued, feel appreciated, and feel needed. You know, people get such huge purpose and satisfaction from their work. Why make it worse when it's quite easy, you know, to help people do the best that they can do? So regular reviews, regular appraisals, I feel like a clear career trajectory. Ashlika said very early in the conversation she didn't know, like, you know, what the progression would be or if she felt safe. That's quite common. It's like, if you can't help someone map out their next 2 years or 5 years at the company, you know, there's an anxiety about not knowing where you're going and what your purpose is in life. So I try and focus as much as possible on preventative, and it's incredibly hard virtually because you can't see someone looking anxious when they're not on Zoom, you know, those bits in the kitchen or in the lounge. And it recently, we had an employee who had COVID, came back to work, was thrown back into it. I didn't pick up on it because I couldn't really see her, and she had to sign off for mental health, and I just didn't even question it and said, come back whenever you're ready, and let's do these regular check-ins, rather than be like, this is when you're coming back and this is what you have to do. Do you know what I mean? So I would say preventative as much as possible, and then when it goes beyond prevention, to have an open ear, be understanding, and, you know, it's just work. It's just work.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for taking the time for today. I think there's lots of amazing takeaways that our audience can really implement within the changes of work. So Thanks to the audience as well for your amazing questions and all of your feedback. We've had loads of amazing feedback for all of the speakers, and Ashlika for sharing your story. So thanks to the audience. I just want to say a big thank you to the Future Workforce Fund, which is a two-year initiative that supports young people in Greater Manchester. So if any of you have got any jobs or opportunities for young people, then please do get in contact with the Get Hired teams. Your opportunities do really change young lives, so please do reach out to us. If you do employ 18 to 30-year-olds and you're interested in leadership skills or anything to do with EDI, then also reach out to us for our Future Leaders event. And earlier, last point, I mentioned women supporting women. So if you'd like to support women supporting women and donate any money, then please just look on our website and donate on the link. So thank you all for today. The webinar will be sent to everybody on an email, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you.